So we're back. Claude Monet. We talked about him as the father of Impressionism, or an Impressionist, and we began our discussion of Claude Monet talking about his reflection on water. And he also studied not just reflection, but shadows. And what is a shadow? Well, a shadow is darkness. A shadow is really the removal of light. And when I always ask, so what color do you think a shadow is? And I always get the answer black or gray or what have you. But shadow is really a darkening of the colors that are normally there. And Monet was famous for his studies of haystacks. And when he did his haystacks, he, just like with reflection, he was really interested in what light was doing. Not to the water, however, because reflection is water. He was interested in what it was doing on land. And he would, his haystacks, back to the haystacks, and it wasn't just haystacks, he also did trees and other things, but the haystacks are the famous paintings that he did, or the studies that he did. And he would sit and observe them in the spring, in the fall, in the winter, in the summer, and he would also observe them in the morning, early morning, late in the afternoon, high noon, and he would watch how that sun moved from one side to the other, and where the shadows ended up when that sun was moving. Now also we know that when, depending on the season, the sun is higher or lower. So when you have a lower sun, your shadow is going to be longer. And when you have a higher sun, or if it's high noon, you're going to have very little shadow. And Monet used to, when he was observing this, there's one famous story where he dug a big ditch in a farmer's land, and he had a farm that was right next to him, and he asked the farmer if he could go onto his property and if he could dig a ditch or sit and observe his haystacks. And the haystack, so he did this, and he was busy painting in there in the ditch, and he wanted it so he could see right up at the same level as where the ground was. And winter came and went, and it was springtime, and that farmer needed to sell the haystack. But Monet wasn't done with his painting of the haystacks. So what he famously did was paid that farmer more than what the haystack was worth, so the farmer would leave it where it was so he could finish his paintings, which is kind of a cool story. So the haystacks, let's go back to a haystack. I have built a modified haystack here, or a representation of what a haystack is, to kind of show you what I mean by shadow. Okay, so we've got my flashlight here, and if the sun, which is represented by my flashlight, is right on top of my haystack, you can see that all we see is the very top, and how it is all the hay or whatever are reflecting from the top down. We don't see it in any way elongated or lengthwise. Now the closer I get to this, the bigger the shadow from above. The farther away I get, the smaller my shadow gets. Now what happens if the sun goes off to the side here? Now my haystack starts getting longer and longer and longer. Look at how long it gets. And it's a darker shade of white. It's not black, it's not gray, it's a darker shade of white. So if I were to, let's say I'm gonna do, it's in green grass. And I'm just doing scribbles to represent grass. And you know what I'm gonna do next, right? I'm gonna take my brush represents my grass. And hold on here, I want to take this. There we go. So I've got my hay stack that's in my grass. Now here comes my light. And my flashlight isn't all that great. But you can see how let's see if we can see, there we go, that's a little better. I am going to show my shadow, which gets very long. The longer or the shorter my sun, the wider my shadow. Now, a lot of artists, like I said, we don't use black. Never do I give you black, or rarely do you get black when you work with me. We use blues or purples or things that darken whatever shade it is. Wayne Thiebaud, some of you have listened to me talk about Wayne Thiebaud, and the desert artist. He famously does all of his shadows in blue, and that's a style for him. Personally, I like shadows in blues and purples, but you could actually do even a darker green if you wanted. And the reason why we don't use black is when I use black, it's almost like you are painting another image of what your thing or your shadow is. And black is a really boring color, and it's boring, but it's also not a color because black does nothing but take things away. We want to add a shadow. We don't want to take away what's underneath our shadow. We want to help, we want to make it look better. So that is shadow in a nutshell. Now, one last note on Monet. He after World War I, France was famously, they lost millions or hundreds of thousands of men to World War I, and the country was devastated by World War I, and he was busy painting his water lilies and watching what was going on. By that time he was older and not able to fight in the war and was frustrated by that. So he felt like he wanted to contribute in his own way to kind of that war relief for the trying to make the country feel better. And so he famously painted 8 panels of water lilies, and he did them in all 4 seasons. The panels are huge. They're 6.5 feet by over almost 300 feet. And they sit in the Musee Orangerie. I don't speak French. I think I butchered it, but good enough where you guys know where they are. And those are now available. You can go in and virtually and see the panels. They were painted especially for the museum, for the country or the people of France, and they were installed after Monet died, but he dedicated it to the people of France because he wanted to give them a place for them to be able to sit and rest. But the water lilies are, again, it's 8 panels, and there are 2 panels for each season. And you can see the changing of the colors. His spring colors are obviously lighter greens and pinks and reds, and winter are very darker colors like the dark blues and dark purples. And but I would encourage you, I will put the link on the video, and I would encourage you to visit virtually and go through and look at all of those panels. When you sit in the white room with the skylights overhead, you can turn and look. It's like being surrounded or being in the pond in the boat. And he famously would sit in his boat and paint all the things around him, and that was part of his process. Sitting in a ditch, sitting in a boat, in order to get that right perspective of what he was painting. I will put that in the link for you, and hopefully you will be able to go, you can visit and see these. There are also in this same museum, there are a lot of other painters who painted at the same time as he did. Some of them you're maybe familiar with classes at school, like Modigliani and Renoir, and other people that were influenced by Monet as well. So let's review, just because I know we did this fairly quickly. Reflection is a mirror image using light to kind of paint on the water. And shadow is when you take light away to leave or to take away the part of the image. Oh gosh, I said that terribly. A shadow is on land where light is blocked, so you remove light. And that's reflection and shadow, brought to you by Claude Monet. So until next time, I hope you take care, and I will look forward to seeing you later. Bye-bye.